Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to call the Cotuit Fire District Prudential Committee to order on March 27th, 2023. Start with a roll call. Seth Burdick.
Present.
Mark Lynch. Mark, are you here?
Present.
Fran Park's present. Charlie
Oh, here you go, present.
and Ray.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
With final approval.
Yeah, we can. I'd accept a motion to accept the minutes after the typos are corrected.
So moved.
Second,
Second. Oh,
all those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay, so Chris, would you like to go first? Or Tom?
Yeah, Chris, were you gonna present or you want me to? I was just gonna, figure that, all the members of the Prudential Committee had copies of our proposed budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, there's no reason for me to go through it line by line. I'd be happy to address any questions you have. And if you need some time to read through it right now, I think this would be an appropriate time for that, of course, at your convenience, whatever's easiest for you. Now we're increasing our expectations and our proposals. And the numbers are all there. If you have any questions about anything in particular, I'd be happy to address those. Chris, did you have anything in particular you wanted to talk about on the general budget, the operating and maintenance, ops and maintenance and salaries?
Right. I think Lisa has a copy of that. It was sent over to her if she wants to bring it up. I don't think there's much to, if they have any questions on any items, I'm just here to answer the
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought as well. And she's having trouble sharing, but they have a copy of it. They've got a copy of it.
So Tom and Chris, what jumped out at me, that there are a few things. That the chemicals are up. I get that, by about 11%. Wages and salaries are up pretty dramatically, including 13% raises for a number of the employees, which is described as cost of living adjustment and merit increases, and that seems very aggressive to me. Can you explain that?
Absolutely.
That's a big number.
Yeah. So we actually have like a 12.3% for our two senior operators. We've got a 15.8% for our junior operator, John, our operator C, who's listed as job operator C, and then a 13% for our office manager. All of those percentages include an 8.7 COLA, 8.7% cost of living as established by the Social Security Administration. So we went with that, and that's something that we've been doing for the last few years. And it's particularly attractive to us and makes sense because of the cost of living, of the way that inflation is hitting everybody. With respect to the operators and Jen, they've done outstanding work this year. They've been asked to step up their games and go over and above what has been expected in the past with software conversions, with security upgrades, with additional licenses and classes. And they've all just embraced it and done what they needed to do. So that's where the merit increases come from. Does that help?
A little bit. As the water department considered the possibility of bonuses in lieu of raises, I can certainly envision, a year where unusual demands are placed on certain employees, and they rise to the occasion. But of course, the annual raise is, is then the basis for next year's annual raise, et cetera, et cetera. So you're getting percentages on percentages, which, as we all know, compounding interest or compounding wages is a very powerful force. I don't know if anyone else on the Prudential Committee, has views on that. I do note that the Prudential Committee salaries are going up around 5%. So I'm surprised at that 8.7% COLA. That comes from what? The annual raise in the Social Security number?
Yep. So that's what the government employees are getting in Social Security.
What was the rate of increase last year? Or for fiscal year 23?
It was pretty significant. It was more significant for Chris and less so for the others, but it was based on the COLA. And then there were what we called merits, which we feel are important to maintain as salary increases, the way that the cost of living on Cape Cod is, and the fact that the people we have are really good at their job and we don't want to lose them. Everybody's replaceable, but it's a steep learning curve, and these guys and one woman are doing outstanding work, even though they're embracing steep learning curves. They're going into new software programs, new security networks, and making things run as smooth as possible. And it's really running smooth over there right now. I don't know if you guys have gone to the online portal that they have now that Jen helps manage, but it's pretty impressive, and it's also going to save the district some money, hopefully, as people embrace the online payment system and billing. So I don't know. To me,
I don't want to in any way imply that
$76,000, $80,000, $58,000. That's what you need to live on Cape Cod.
I just want to make a comment that, in my job, I had to go to conferences that we had computer upgrades all the time and I had to be licensed and do my studies for all of the licensing. And that wasn't, it was just part of my work. It was just part of the job that I went to. It's just normal business. I think I agree that I think that some of the races are very, and have been in the past recently, very hefty. Seth, do you have any comments?
Other than what the rate of increase was last year. Now the fire department is running at 14.31% per their contract for permanent full-time firefighters for fiscal year 24, right?
That's incorrect, Seth.
What is the number that, I'm sorry, I was just trying to pull it up.
Yeah, so there's a number in there, but that number includes, you're looking at, we move some things around, we move something from one bucket to a different bucket. It's really, if you look at it overall, it's an 8.8% increase.
8.8. I was just curious how they were running in comparison.
And by contract, Seth, we're at 6, 6, and 6, so we actually gave a 6% increase versus the, I think, 8% COLA reference. So we're at a 6.666 for the next 3 years, and then the additional revenues or the additional costs come in as far as some target items that we're asking the union to focus on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was it was more, I guess, not so much a question or comment as a question.
Yeah, I guess, Fran, I understand what you're saying, that your job required that, and as did mine for years. And, in a lot of respects, many jobs that require that, particularly government jobs, employees remain underpaid for years, and they end up moving around because of that. We lose good employees, and we don't want to see that happen.
So I have another question. So this budget that you've presented, does this include the the proposal for giving the first 20,000 gallons to all users free?
Nope,
No?
no,
Okay,
we haven't voted on that yet, Fran. We might take that up in April, at the April's meeting. And if we do that, again, there would be a rate increase in some tiers, which would compensate for that lost revenue to the district. So there'd be no net loss. And in
okay.
fact, it might be a net gain the way these people are using water.
Okay. Any other questions about the water department budget?
I would like to add one other thing too, with respect to some conversations I had with Mark Boudreau last week, and that the commission's been working with on, is that the state law, chapter 4169B, requires that if we make any revenue over and above the water department's expenses, that we have to reduce the rates to get that money back to the payers, to the users, the consumers. Now, I'm not saying that oh, let's just, continue to raise the rates and give everybody raises, but it seems like we're pretty flush right now, and it's a good time for us to be able to say that and feel that way, given the state of the economy. We just keep making more money here every year, even though we've raised the rates. And again,
I'm curious
our
about that.
operators and our office manager are doing outstanding work and really stepped up to the plate in the last 2 years. We want to recognize that and keep them as part of the team.
Now, so that's the state law, that anything above and beyond the operating expense, we have to find a way to return via either a rebate or a rate decrease.
In the
Yeah,
enabling,
so it's over and above operating expenses, salaries, maintenance, any bonds, outstanding bonds that we have, right, that we're paying on.
Right.
So,
And any forward thinking, is there any forward looking aspect to it? Meaning,
so,
like, I know you guys were talking stabilization or whatever, or the just,
yeah,
upcoming possible forward looking expenses. Or
Yeah.
because it seems like we'd start to have to give the money back pretty soon. We have bonds amounting to how much, well, for the last water tower, there's still several, there's
yeah,
a couple of $1 million worth of that, right?
right. And we met with Ray, and we're in okay shape right now. We met earlier this week, or actually late last week. And we're in okay shape right now. This year's revenue might cause us to have to look at the rates, or we have expenses that are coming up in addition to what's in the proposed operating budget that you see in front of you. If you have that, we also have our capital improvement plan projects, which include some source water protection work, as well as water main upgrades. And those upgrades are going to need to get done. We're hoping that we can write the articles so that there's enough flexibility. So if and when any other entities are, public works projects are embarked upon in the village, we can maybe coordinate with that. Because, we got to dig up roads for that, and those are a couple $100,000. So the expenses that we're looking at going forward are significant.
So we don't look like we're in a position to be upside.
Plant, you're looking at $10 to $20 million, right?
Right.
It's
I
gonna
guess
be
what I'm really curious, I'm sorry. What I'm really curious is about, you guys have a threshold, which you've determined from a accounting side that, that seems that if we got to the point where we had to start lowering the rates because we're not spending the money, defeats the whole purpose. We probably have millions of dollars worth of infrastructure work aside from just the treatment plan that we could be budgeting for into the future for these revenue dollars.
Absolutely.
yeah. I'd just like to point out that the water district has never been turned down, to the best of my knowledge, for any requests that they've made at the annual district meeting for funding for a project.
And we're thankful that the community does respect the water department's work and the fact that they have a good, reliable, healthy source of water. I think it's a wonderful program that the district has put together for all of us.
Okay, any other questions for water?
Not for me.
Chris, you want to add anything?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. I don't usually talk about salaries or anything like that. That's usually up to you guys to discuss. I will say that the guys did go over and above. They've stepped into a higher position. John has got almost every license out there. JR went and got his backflow license. So, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was not asked of them to do, but they did themselves also.
Chris, can I
Yeah,
ask you a question?
Sure.
I was down at the dock the other day and saw the hydrant down there. Is that a
Yeah.
hydrant? Is that a big enough hydrant?
That's only a 2-inch line that runs down that road
Oh,
right now, and a lot of it's in groundwater. So we've never even attempted to do much there with that because we're afraid to touch anything down there. We don't want anything to break around there because it's salt water. You know, that might be a project that we're talking about.
yeah.
Maybe we'll bring something a little larger, plastic down there at least, and get rid of the iron that's there, and something a little larger that's plastic that'll be better in the salt water that's down there.
Yeah, because that doesn't seem to be big enough to me to take care of any fire or anything else.
We use it every once in a while, but it's only to clear that line. Usually, right now, it's more of a health reason that it's there.
Okay, thanks.
Just to get
I
back,
guess I just want to go on record. Well, first of all, the water department seems to be running extremely well. And that's, you know, to a large extent, Chris's good work and the entire staff. I do, you know, I am troubled by last year, there were merit increases and cost of living adjustments. This year, again, merit increases and cost of living adjustments. We definitely want to keep the people we've got, but 13% just seems to be a number that's, you know, not consistent with what our constituents certainly are getting, you know, in raises this year at their various jobs. So I don't know if Fran and Seth have any thoughts on that, or if they're comfortable with that number.
No, I agree with you, Mark.
I mean, I do to a certain extent as well. It's just that it's you know, my business is a lot different than a municipal business. You know what I mean? In terms of, it depends. I can respect the idea that you got to keep good people when you can find them. The job market on Cape Cod is very bizarre. And, you know, I appreciate that there's no place to live because I deal with that on a daily basis when it comes to my employees.
Yeah.
Are my employees getting 13% raises? Not necessarily, but in certain cases they are, just because for me, it's a matter of, you know, survival to keep people around. So, I mean, I can understand both sides of it. I mean, if we do it every single year, as you say, there's a significant compounding aspect to that, where we're going to have what may become outsized salaries in the future if it was an ongoing thing. What was the rate last year? Was it similar? I mean, the COLA was slightly
it was less.
smaller last year.
Yeah, it was like 5 or 6.
I think it was 5.9.
And then I believe Chris was the only one who received a merit increase last year.
Oh,
I mean, going forward, maybe every year you can't. I wouldn't say that would be sustainable to do 13% year after year. If they really have done the work and they deserve it, and it's a good thing. But I mean, as inflation inches down, the COLA will go down theoretically, if inflation does in fact go down to any meaningful level. That, you know, but I mean, I can't. I defer to your judgment as commissioners to do it, as long as it's not every single year, and you guys are not going to all be there next year. I don't know what the determination will be.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand what you guys are saying, and I think you're right on with the fact that you can't continue to, to give 13% or even 7-8% raises every year. But this year we felt it was important to do for the reasons that I mentioned, and I just add to that two of the operators, two of the more senior operators, are now in a position where we feel that we don't need an assistant superintendent, and so we haven't backfilled that position, right? We decided to do that last year, hoping that they would continue to stay on and work hard and increase their licenses and their training as they have. So we're pretty good. We feel pretty good that we have a good succession plan in place if Chris plays the lottery and hits it and decides to move on. And that's another thing that crosses our mind, is that, okay, we want to not only retain the people that we have for the existing operations of the department, but also for the department's future. But I totally understand. We don't want to overpay them. They are in line with the payments of other similar operators in the districts on the Cape. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well. And like in COMM, a lot of those operators, they only do one thing. Our guys do everything, right? So that makes them pretty well. They're a highly desired crew. And I know Chris has had calls from other superintendents recently saying, hey, got any guys that are thinking of moving? Unfortunately, he said no.
And how do we compare to
call me.
COM in rates? Meaning, is it competitive? Are our rates competitive? Meaning the pay rates
They are now
compared to COM or Barnstable or West Barnstable? West Barnstable doesn't have one, does it?
No, but Barnstable is very similar in size.
Yeah, and I know they just hired a new superintendent over in Barnstable, and I don't know what he's making now. I haven't searched that.
I know. Well, you're always like with Chris, we're one lottery went away from a functional water department to maybe a non-functional water department. So probably keep keep you happy at any rate.
Well, I don't think that. I think that JR and Matt could do a good job for us. I think the district would be fine.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to move on to
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yep.
to the fire department budget. Kevin?
So I will defer as Tom did. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I will tell you, unfortunately, the deputy and the chief have had to respond to calls concurrent calls that are going on. So you have me tonight. So if by chance if I'm not able to answer something, I'll be happy to find the answer. So that being said, are there any questions about the budget? Seth, to maybe jump into something here, we moved some during negotiations, we moved some money around, so to speak, from paying in one particular fashion to paying under the salary itself versus as a stipend. As a result of that, about 5.48% was zeroed out. So if you look at our budget, you look at line item on ours, line item 8 or 9 rather, went from 55,087 to 0. That actually got pushed back up into salary. So as a result, that pushed the salary up about 5.48% above and beyond what the actual raises were.
But
Right, that's
doesn't
at 14% that I looked at. I see it now with the 100% education now.
Yeah.
doesn't that now make that part of their salary, which increases their retirement contribution?
It would increase that, absolutely would. Stipends are not something we should be using, and we will no longer be using them. So it's all included as part of the salary, correct?
So when we had the stipends, it wasn't part of their retirement, correct?
I do not know the answer. Actually, that's not necessarily true. There was a lot of different conversations about that. I understand with the Barnstable Retirement Board, whether that was true or not. I'd never heard the final answer. If I thought I may have heard actually that it was included in, but I never got a final on that.
I can assure you retirement deductions were not taken out of the paternity stipend.
Paternity is separate than this particular one. I understand what you're saying there, but the other stipends were for education. So the paternity stipend was a small one-off deal. The other stipends we're talking about were done annually over the last 12 years anyways that I know of.
Education incentives have always been subject to retirement deductions.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. That was my question.
And Kevin, not to put you on the spot, but do you know what that number is, the stipend number that is now taken out of another category and put into the salary category?
Yes, Mark, it's on line, line number, what did I say, 8, 9? Yep, line item 9, which is $55,087. And that is moved up into line 8, which is salary and wages permanent full time.
Got it. Great.
And just so you know, the reason for this is firefighters who have been here longer have this incorporated into their regular base pay and OT. Others get an incentive lump sum afterwards. So basically, it all is part of base wages now, but it's calculated differently for some people.
And Kevin, that remains true to today?
All stipends are off the board. There's no longer any stipends in the Cotuit Fire District.
That's what I thought. Lisa, can
Wise, I
you
don't think
scroll up on this document, please? Thanks.
Can you see what I'm looking at?
Yeah, I want to go to the bottom of the document, so I'm not sure if that means scrolling up or scrolling down. Okay,
That would be
thanks.
scrolling down.
Okay.
And to your point on looking down the bottom, great point. If you look at, well, you can't really see it. There's no line items here, but if you look, there's a, hold on one second, Lisa. If you look, we have an overall budget increase this year of 8.77%.
Right here.
And the labor and salaries is up 9.55%. That has to do with the 6% annual raise. And then the incentives for certain training, not requirements, but things we would like the firemen to get trained on. Is that right, Kevin? Is that where that number comes from?
Yeah, Mark, since you absolutely right. You were part of that negotiating committee, so you hit it right on the nail right on the head.
Okay. All right. Anything else that you want to point out that's a particular increase or decrease this year that we should be aware of?
No, sir.
Slightly different topic then, Kevin. Did you happen to see my email, which I sent out shortly before this, the meeting?
10 seconds before I got on, I'll take a look at it after the fact and we'll talk, we'll connect up, okay?
You don't have an answer in 10 seconds?
I don't.
I'm a little disappointed, but okay, thanks.
Seth, are you all set with the fire department budget?
Yes. Yeah, I have no further questions about it.
All right.
I feel like that's a
Thanks,
trial
Kevin.
statement. I feel like that's a prosecutor statement, Seth. I have no further questions.
No further questions on this.
At this time.
Hey, listen, if
At
anybody
this
does, I
time.
appreciate the time, everybody. And this is, we're moving forward very well at the fire department. Chief Brown has done a great job. As you all know, we have a new deputy. So all very positive stuff going on at the fire department, and we do appreciate your support, okay? If anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Kevin, one quick one. What's the latest with the new ambulance status?
So we're talking new ambulance versus spare. Which one are we
Yeah.
speaking about, Mark?
Either one.
Yep, so Sandwich is about, so let's start off with the spares. Sandwich, excuse me, is about to take delivery, if they have not already taken delivery of their new ambulance, which means we'll be leveraging their unit as a joint piece of equipment between Sandwich and Cotuit, and we'll be leveraging that as our spare. We're doing some contract work with them right now. We're talking about the Ts and Cs of that right now. So that is tracking for a July 1st or thereabout timeframe that would come online for us. So that's all very positive. With regards to the second ambulance, we had I just saw an invoice come through on it, but we have a position for the frame. I don't think we've had complete commitment on the box yet, but we're working through that. There's huge issues with supply on both primarily on the frame. The frame is the big issue. And once the frame is secured, we'll be able to have the company will be able to start building the box on top of it.
Okay, so we're still way out time-wise on that.
Yeah, we're a couple years out on that probably still.
Oh, boy.
Would be my guess.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks.
You too.
I have one question.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
I haven't received the fire department's annual report.
Oh. Charlie, I'll make sure you get that tonight or tomorrow morning, okay? Apologize for
Okay.
that, sir.
Thank you.
It's all set to go for you. I apologize.
okay, Ray?
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Ray, you're up. You're muted. Ray, you're muted.
Ray's not muted. I think he's having difficulty finding the right microphone. Ray. We can't hear you. Try a different microphone. I think he's going to put his headset on. There he goes. Unmute yourself now. We can't hear you. We can't hear you, Ray.
All right, so,
Maybe we can come back to him after he figures that out.
yeah,
Ray, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, we can hear you now.
we can hear you.
Okay. Let me increase that. Don't want to mess with it or I'll lose you guys.
Yeah, right.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes,
Yes,
Okay. I was trying to comment on the water department. Tom's comment about the fact that we have to give money back. We did the stress test, if you will. And it's not just the water department operating. The law clearly indicates that it's also those costs incurred by the district for its water operation. And when we did that test, there was no surplus. In fact, there was a deficit, and there's been a deficit even after the price increase. So from one standpoint, we have no problem with the law and the district's compliance with that law. I wish we could have talked a little bit more about the special articles.
Ray, can I interrupt there for a second?
Surely.
How is it that the those costs are not typically and usually incorporated into the water department budget and or the fire department budget. Is it because we approve the water department budget, we approve the fire department budget, and then we approve the pensions separately? Is that the difference?
Well, you can approve it really any way the committee chooses. But several years ago, before I came, it was decided to isolate employee benefits and debt service from the respective departments. I think it's probably better to handle that way. We can go through the allocation on an ad hoc basis to look at what the cost of each department is. But it's if the committee so chooses to make those allocations, we can reorganize the accounting to do that.
I do remember discussing this issue last year and requesting that at least for voting purposes, the water department budget and the fire department budget include the full freight, so to speak. That is their actual costs, the debt service, the benefit numbers, and whatever other numbers are actually attributable to those departments. Would it make sense to, going forward, for those to be the items to be approved by the voters?
It's basically up to you.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning behind segregating them in the way that they did?
At the time, there was probably, well, certainly if you take a look at employee benefits, you were allocating them between two departments. The largest number, retirement, was if you will, a rather arbitrary allocation based on wages. And it was, I can't really speak for the rationale back there, but I can assume that it was thought that it would be easier, to deal with that as one category, rather than to deal with it 2 or 3 times as you looked at the various departments. The same with debt. Debt does have some fire department elements and always has, even though the majority is water department. And even though we borrow money as a district, not as a department. So it is really, you are approving what the district does, not what the water department does in terms of debt. And certainly with respect to benefits.
That was part of the reasons. One of the problems that it's really a small problem, but for workers' compensation for all the workers in the district was coming out of the water department budget, which, they shouldn't have been paying for all the workers' compensation. So that was part of the reason that it was all consolidated under the finance department. I think it was just made it a smoother operation and easier to follow the trends, as far as I understand.
It's certainly easier to follow the trends.
Yeah.
But I went through I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, nothing. I was just, like Mark says, the full freight. So would it be a more clear picture for voters and for the overall accounting of the departments if they had the complete financial picture of what their encumbrances are, vis their retirement, all that jazz? Do you know what I mean? What would their budgets would be a lot bigger then, wouldn't they? And the finance department would be smaller.
Well, they're really not in the finance department. We treat them as district budgets.
Right, district budget.
Separately as Yeah, they would go up. And usually, if someone from the water department is presenting, they're really not, I mean, they're just gonna have to take the numbers that we give them.
Right.
Although there is going to be a discussion about allocation. The rate study had one basis, which I don't believe is realistic. When I did my study, I did what I call a full comprehensive allocation. For example, the rate study didn't include anything for administration. And there's a significant cost in administration for both the water department and the fire department. In fact, that's why you have a finance department. So if you would like that presentation, I can certainly compile it and do comparative numbers so that you're looking at budget to budget numbers. I will allocate it based on what I believe is a reasonable, which is basically salary and revenue. And with respect to insurance, salary, revenue, and fixed asset proportions.
I wasn't contemplating that we would fold, what you're talking about is also folding part of the Prudential budget into water department and fire department.
Why do we exist, Mark?
Exactly, but and now we're really starting to.
And the legislation clearly says those costs which the district incurs in support of its water operations.
Yeah.
So why haven't we done it before now then?
For the reasons we just said. Number one, no one ever challenged the compliance with the law. So we never really had to demonstrate that compliance. And second of all, for the reasons we gave, there was the benefits and debt service and stabilization. In fact, everything was treated independently. I mean, every corporation I've ever been involved with had an overhead charge for any operating division. We basically have 3 operating divisions: water, fire, and Freedom Hall. And you would allocate all of the cost to your operating departments to give a true profitability picture of each of your operating departments.
But we're not supposed to be profitable though, right?
Or your lack of profitability by department. Excuse me. Good point.
Yeah, I mean, the upshot here is you want the voters to know really what the full in cost of the water department and the fire department are. And I suppose, Ray, to your point, if you're going to include debt service and benefits, you probably should include finance as well. It sounds like something that may require another call. We have quite an agenda tonight. Can we put a pin in this and come back to it?
Certainly. As I was saying, I wish I could spend a little more time on the articles, because I think the articles bear some discussion, and I'll try to touch on the points as I go through. I'll do a little bit more detail than just say that the numbers are the numbers. Looking at kind of a by the finance department, we have a 5% COLA. I based that on what the consumer price index was in February. I think it's, if other people are at 8%, I'm going to have to say that's probably not fair to Lisa. The audit, which I'm going to ask your approval on, reflects a 3-year agreement, which proposed agreement that the auditors and I have had discussions about, which sets the rate at $17,500 for the next 3 years. That's up from $15,000 for the last 3 years. The budget line, which is $20,000, also includes the $2,500 that we pay annually for our OPED actuarial study. The other areas, the insurance, looks like the initial estimate by the agents indicate that it will not exceed 5%. It may indeed be less, and I will learn more about that over the next couple of weeks. I've anticipated a 4% increase in our third-party employee consulting firm. They have held the price for the last 3 years, and I'm just, based on caution, abundance of caution for this minor item, I'm putting in an increase of 4%. Finally, I've anticipated both an annual and a special district meeting, which accounts for the large increase in our annual meeting and ballot cost line. There are no special articles at this time for the district, although based on the I guess the meeting that's about to start, the town of Barnstable is going to, the property, I guess it is. And I think I'll defer to Mark and Fran to speak about that. It could be that we may have to move up the some of the appropriations relative to the school committee. Freedom Hall, basically I've inflated some of the running rates. I provided a 5% COLA for our part-time employee at Freedom Hall. And then I increased and inflated based on running rates for some of the items, but it was offset by a decrease in building maintenance, which I believe reflects the fact that we're going to be buying furniture this year, and that will be an item that we will not need to replace next year. Well, that's, Fran, go ahead.
I never did get around to replacing the toilet and wash basin in the ladies' room. So I'd like to do that next for FY24.
Special article or within the operating?
We can do it within the operating.
Then I'll revise that figure accordingly. Debt service. The debt service for long-term is basically predicated on the established amortization schedules for both the USDA and our new refinanced debt. The short-term debt is predicated on the standard 5-year. That debt is something that will be going out before the end of the fiscal year and have to be replaced next year. There's some question about what maturity will set. It appears that it may coincide with the cardiac monitor that the fire department wants, because they are telling me that that's about a 52-week lead time. I'm encouraging them to place the order as soon as it is passed in the annual district meeting to ensure that we can get that in fiscal 24 and maybe do a refinancing of the stretcher, service truck, and monitor at the same time next May or June. The benefits, the group insurance, Cape Cod Municipal Health Group voted a 4% increase for all but dental policies. And so we've incorporated that based on the running rate. And then we added a placeholder for the new firefighter that will be hired to replace Shane. OPED, the pension, of course, is based on the levy that we receive annually from Barnstable County Retirement. And OPED is based on inflating the annual determined contribution. The latest we have is for F22. So we inflated that up for F24 and then offset it with what we pay for retirees, which would normally come out of the trust, but we pay out of operations, and so therefore get credit as a contribution to our OPED trust.
Ray, I have one question. The retirement assessment figure, you've been surprised each time when we've paid less than the assessment, and the reason is we get
Yeah, I
the
know.
assessment is
Yeah,
for
I know, but I have to budget for the larger figure in
okay.
case there's we have some sort of hiccup, because it's a very short window.
Okay,
If we don't need that short window, then we have a budget deficit. So we always provide for the larger figure.
I just thought I'd raise that. Thanks.
Going back to funding, when we roll all this up, we have a 6.25% increase in the tax rate. And that's predicated on the following deductions from the tax levy. Ambulance is basically projected at level funds at about 261,000, which is a low ball estimate for ambulance and tax, penalty, and interest. The reason, and I will keep saying low ball, is because we have to project these local revenues at a low rate in the tax recap or in the calculation of the tax levy. Number one, because the state doesn't allow us to do anything else, and also for our own protection to avoid what would be a revenue deficit if for any reason the revenue did not meet our expectation or our estimate in the tax calculation. So water department, I projected only 80% of what we project their 23 revenue estimate to be. I've used all of the free cash, plus I've used 200,000 of stabilization. Remember last year we put $400,000 of free cash into stabilization on the theory that it was better to protect, to hold it ourselves rather than to surrender it back to the state. So I used 200 of that 400 to help offset what otherwise was approximately a 9% increase in the tax levy. All of the special articles then were funded by debt, with the exception of a $10,000 article in the fire department, which they state is for IT cybersecurity. We already have a 2020 or fiscal 23 appropriation in the district for a district-wide cybersecurity review, similar to the one that we just concluded at West Barnstable. I've alerted Kevin to that, and I think probably Kevin and I will sit down and try to figure out what the scope of what they intend, to see if what was proposed meets that scope, and make adjustments accordingly. The other thing about appropriations is the water department has an appropriation, special article for wellhead and special septic, which we found in the legal review is something that isn't permitted by our enabling legislation that created the water district. or water department, rather, excuse me, it isn't a district. It's a department within the Cotuit Fire District. So that enabling or expansion of our enabling legislation does not permit payment of funds on private land unless you offer to every one of the members of the district. So I'm not sure how I deal with that. I have to provide for it some way because it becomes an appropriation. Normally, you would make it a debt appropriation, and that's probably the least painful because it'll only create authorized debt, which we can subsequently rescind, rather than leaving it in, say, the raised and appropriate category, which would put it in the tax levy. Since it's questionable whether that appropriation can indeed be authorized, subject to a vote even, or provided for. That's about all I had on the budget, unless there were any questions.
Can I make a comment on the source water protection line item, the proposed 120,000?
Yep.
Madam Chair, is that okay?
Yes, you can, please.
So I met with Attorney Boudreau and we talked about whether or not any monies could be spent to protect water quality and improve water quality if those actions were taken on private lands. And as Ray said, it's not allowed in our enabling legislation at this point, which was, from like 1835 or something like that. So that might get changed, but that would be a change that would take quite a bit of time and quite a bit of expense. So we're not sure what to do with that. Howsoever, we still want to move forward with source water protection plans and want that $120,000 in there for public lands, which could include septic system upgrades for the water department's office itself, as well as stormwater management on any public ways and adjacent public lands, so that we can address some of the impacts of sodium and the other contaminants that are making their way into our well fields. Nitrogen, phosphorus, bacteria, etc. So I don't know, Ray, how you appropriate that money, but I do want to just say that we still want to keep that money in there. We foresee potential reactive barriers on the edge of our water department land. We foresee stormwater retention systems, potentially also some individual treatment systems added to pumping stations, right? So that we don't have to have a full treatment plant. So it just kind of depends on what comes down the pipe with legislation and with actions by the state to deal with contaminants of emerging concern like the PFAS and PFOS.
Can
EPA.
you just go back
EPA.
1 second? You mentioned an action that might preclude the necessity for a full filtration system. Can you just explain that briefly?
So was that with the pumping stations, individual?
I think that's what it referred to. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we can put filters on the source water. We're pumping the water out of the ground. It has contaminants in it, right? Most systems go with full system-wide treatment plants, right? Which are $15-20 million. And we may need to do that depending on what we're filtering out. But we don't want to preclude, we don't want to be reactive. We'd rather be proactive. If there's smaller treatments that we can do, like we currently do, right? Like adding lime to bring the pH up, adding certain chemicals, or filtering with activated carbon. If we can do that cost effectively to the volumes of water that we have to push through those pumping stations, then we want the ability to go ahead and do that.
Got it. Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, it's no magic wand, unfortunately.
So we would probably do that with debt then. It would, it's an asset that would have a life beyond 1 year.
Yeah,
The equipment.
Ray, you mentioned that most of the debt service relates to water department facilities. Is there an opportunity of, the trend with the water department is that the revenues appear to be increasing. Is there a trend or a possibility to pay down current debt related to water department facilities from what is not yet, but may eventually turn into a surplus?
I'll have to see if the either instrument, I'm pretty sure that I'll check, but I'm pretty sure that neither the USDA nor the rollover has a feature that allows prepayment.
Yeah, I figured as much, but if you could check that, that would be great.
What would be the advantage of that?
Well, that's the second question. Depending on what the interest rates are that those bonds were purchased at, I'm not sure how old they are. But if they're within the last 10 years, maybe we don't want to do that. But it would be nice to know if it was even a possibility.
I'll find out what the possibility is and the rates. The USDA was a subsidized loan from U.S. Department of Agriculture at a favorable rate, and I'll have to look up what the refinancing rate was.
Okay, as you point out, they may not even allow for prepayment, but it would be good to know the answer.
I will find it out.
Thanks, Ray.
So, Tom,
yes.
yeah, have you, the county provides funding for people for their septic systems. Has your committee discussed working with them?
No, we haven't, but now that we've got a clearer picture on whether or not we can spend money on private septic systems that could be contaminating our district's water, it's a great recommendation, Fran, and I think that we will pursue that.
Okay.
I think that those funds are available just for certain lower income properties, but I'm not sure. We need to look into that.
Well, there might be other funds elsewhere that, you could tap into, grants and things like that, outside grants, or, federal government.
I thought those funds were generally available, and their interest rate is subsidized down to zero for low-income individuals.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that's available
Yeah.
for everybody.
That's the county one, Ray?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We all set, Ray?
Yeah, I was, we're running late, and I was relative to where we are in February in terms of the current fiscal year. We're substantially ahead in revenue. We're on target or below on the expenditure side. So from a overall standpoint, we're in a very solid position currently on F23. I am continuing to invest the surplus cash and stabilization funds in T-bills and CDs respectively, and we'll continue doing that to get a little boost on the interest rate. The stabilization funds, we're getting about 3%, and I'm getting about 4.5% on CDs. T-bills are giving me about 4% versus 0.2% in our operating.
Yeah.
So I'll continue that program. But in terms of our position, very good at the end of February.
Great, thank you. All right, Freedom Hall. Lisa, some investigating about the OWL sound recorder, and it doesn't sound like it's gonna be suitable for us in Freedom Hall. And the furniture, I think we can probably hold off on the chairs, but we definitely need new tables. So, and I think we used to have all just 6-foot tables. We only have one 6-foot table now, and the others just were borrowed by people and never made their way back home. And so we can get what looks like a very sturdy table with a 10-year guarantee for $175 that's 6 feet long at WB Mason. And I think we probably need at least 4 of those, preferably 6. So I don't know if you want to buy them this year or buy them next year, but
Either way is fine by me. How much do we have left? We had a surplus in the maintenance budget, didn't we?
Yes,
For Freedom Hall?
yes.
Might as well just buy them now then, in my opinion.
it'll probably,
I'm fine with that.
the 175 will probably be a little bit less because we get, Lisa, how much does WB Mason, is there a percentage that they take off for us because we go through the county?
No, we don't pay sales taxes or anything extra through there. It looks as if we have at least 6,000 left for this year in buildings and repairs and maintenance.
Oh, good. I'll take 6 tables.
And you
There you
want
go.
6 feet versus the shorter ones? Are the shorter ones easier to handle? Are we still going to be distancing? Would we prefer more smaller tables?
They're
Or-
easier to handle, but when people use the hall for different things, the 6-foot table is much better for setting up for the, for the book sale and the plant sale and the Christmas stuff. And it's easier on the users of the hall to have the 6-foot tables.
Okay, as long as I'm not lifting them, that's fine.
So I'd accept a motion for 6 tables.
So
I
moved.
move that we purchase 6 tables at $175 a piece for Freedom Hall.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and make that order.
Yes, please.
All right.
I'll send the, where is it here? I had a picture of the tables.
All right. Well, I'll coordinate with you later about that. Okay.
I'll send this off to you.
All right.
Okay, now we're down to the Cotuit School. Mark, do you want to?
Yes. So Jim Danhauser, who's on this call, and I hope will contribute if I miss anything. Jackie Barton and I met with the town on Friday, expressed some dissatisfaction with the pace of things. And their immediate reaction was, well, your takeaway for this meeting should be that we want to have this all done in advance of your annual meeting at the end of May. And that's what we're aiming to do, which of course was very good news and more than a little surprising given their pace over the last, 6 months. Part of which I must say, came from our concerns about the oil tank. The latest is that I think I've mentioned to you, they've agreed to remove the oil tank. They have put out requests for quotes to do that. And they're supposed to be meeting shortly, like within the next 10 days with possible contractors to do that. On the other hand, they had told us that they had pumped the tank out previously, and that evidently has not happened.
Oh, okay.
So color me skeptical on the dates here. They were supposed to tonight go before the planning board to get an approval not required designation on the division of the properties. You recall that they're going to keep 5, we're going to keep 8 approximately of the 13-acre site. There was no quorum. That has now been bounced to the next planning board meeting. Suffice it to say that there is now some question whether they will be able to get the 2 readings before the town committee, town council to get this done. I think we now have their attention, but I remain a little bit skeptical. The conservation restriction, and just so we're all talking about the same thing, they keep 5, we keep 8, and we have a conservation restriction which covers their 5, meaning what they can and cannot do with it. I raised an issue kind of at the 11th hour that they're working on right now. The driveway, it's called, between Main Street and the back of Cotuit School will be kept by them. They have the option to put in parking along that driveway. I requested that we be allowed to, if at some point in the future we decide to put a firehouse there, that we be allowed to improve that road to allow for the back and forth of fire trucks through that area. Other than that, I think that we are pretty close on the conservation, very close on the conservation restriction. Mark Robinson has reviewed it. We want Mark Boudreau to take another look at it. And we want Mark Boudreau to weigh in on kind of what the closing documents, so to speak, will be. And so I will call Mark this week to weigh in on those topics. Fran, I think you have the most recent copy of the conservation restriction. Seth, do you have a copy?
Yes.
You don't know that I do, actually.
All right.
Would you send me one
Chris,
just so that I have it?
So I have a couple of questions about it.
Sure.
The first one is on page 1, and it says that a Massachusetts Municipal Corporation duly organized pursuant to Chapter 328 Acts of 1926, with principal place of business at 64 High Street, Cotuit, Massachusetts, acting by and through its Board of Water Commissioners. I think that should be the Prudential Committee. And on page 6, the last on the bottom, it says permitted activities and reserved rights for the 5.5 acres. It says with grantees written permission delivered by a vote of the Board of Cotuit Water Commissioners, not to be unreasonably unheld the installation and use of maintenance of new open air recreation facilities, including a playground, fitness course, tot lot, basketball court, and the like, and a new or redesigned walking trails in the forest. I think that should be the Prudential Committee also.
Okay. Any other concerns or questions about the conservation restriction? What else? I think that's it. Jim, please weigh in if I've missed anything or you want to add any color at all.
Well, just a couple of details, at least according to David Anthony's last email. They're going to have a site visit for vendors interested in bidding on the removal of the underground storage tank this Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And the fuel tank did not get pumped because it all happens of a piece. They need to have an inspector who views the pumping, who will also certify that it's been done, and will be the same person who will certify that the tank got removed clean. So that's the reason for the delay in that. The issue that you pointed to, Mark, which is of some concern, is that they don't have another planning board meeting until April 10th. And so they were hoping to get a first read at town council on April 6th so that they could take the vote on April 27th, because it does require a read and then a vote at a second meeting. So the fact that they will not have the A&R in hand as a formal matter on the 6th, they're researching whether they can go to town council or not. So we'll find that out. I also remind all of us that we've had a series of dates before that have uniformly not been met. But I do think that the tenor of our last meeting was such that they do recognize that they need to do everything they can within the confines of what they can legitimately do, try to get it done before our next annual meeting. And the concept was that the town council would approve it
to begin.
The concept was the town council would approve it, and then we would do whatever we needed to do at our annual meeting to get ratification, so that we would know that everything was in hand before we went back to the voters for any discussion of the school property again.
Jim, thank you. That's a very important point. We informed them that we thought we might need to do that, but that is go back to the voters and kind of get explicit approval for the deal that has been negotiated. That is probably a topic that we want Mark Boudreau to weigh in on, in that, is that required? Or do we have the authority from the village voters to negotiate and close a deal?
Now, in our last discussion with Mark some time ago, he indicated that he thought that we did have that authority, but I think the Prudential Committee is going to want to make triple, quadruple, 500 times sure that in fact that's the case.
I think that is the state of play.
I think the prudent option is to, if we can't do it by the annual meeting, is to have a special district meeting and to do it through a special district meeting. I think that's pretty much the way things have always been operated in Cotuit. So
I won't mention that to the town with the perhaps forlorn hope that they can get it done, but I think you're probably right, Fran. When, what is our best estimate, or do we have a date for our annual meeting?
it's the annual meeting's going to be the 24th of May, correct, Charlie? And the vote will be the 23rd. It's the fourth Wednesday. So Charlie, I have a question. You're muted. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh, okay. So when you count the 30 days, do you have to stop at the day that we vote for closing the warrant?
right. You have to close the warrant 30 days prior to the meeting.
So that would be the day before the meeting, the 30th day.
Yeah, well, yeah, 30, yeah.
Okay. So that would be May 23rd. No, I'm sorry. Oops, wrong.
April 23rd.
That would be
The meeting would be May 31. So closing the warrant 30 days prior.
Isn't it the 4th?
No, it's the last Wednesday of the,
Oh, it's the last Wednesday? I thought it was always the 4th. Okay.
So I have a question, not about the district meeting or anything, not a question, more of a statement or a thought. That so the problem with the planning board was they didn't have a quorum this evening. That's why they weren't able to take the issue up, right?
That's what we're
So in
told.
light, yeah, that's so good from them. Good work, everybody. But the snows, now that we're moving to the end of this process so that we have, I mean, in theory, obviously not in practice necessarily, that we have a, you know, an end to the transfer process. What do we want to do now, or what can we do now or in the near future to start, instead of with the, you know, we have impaneled the transfer committee, the negotiators, you guys have done all that. What is our next best step for the process after that? Do we need to start thinking about what we're going to do, how we're going to, what sort of committee or what, or, you know, how are we going to do the next aspect of it? Because we have, you know, a series of things that are going to crop up immediately after that.
Yeah.
You know, i.e. the possible litigation or whatever, the challenge to the very idea of using our vendor to start any kind of assessment or planning. What do you guys think is the prudent thing to do? What would we do next?
Well, I think once we get approval by the voters to accept the building again, I think then, you know, there are some people that, you know, we have to decide what we're going to do with it. And
Well, that's what I guess what I'm really talking about is
yeah,
that.
and that's
So
the-
are we going to have to create a new not space needs committees, but a facility management or facility, you know, whatever it would be, whatever you would call it, facility use committee, or, you know, that will maybe impanel people from this committee, other committees, and
yeah,
people of the community,
yes, I
or
think,
will we?
you know,
I mean, I'm just curious about those steps. And do we really think it's necessary to go back again to a district meeting or a special district meeting, especially what are we going to provide to them in terms of, we don't have a whole lot of, we could make forward-looking statements about what it's going to, we're not going to have any information other than what we've already essentially said, which was
right.
that we shall transfer this property, whether, you know, an albatross or not, to our, you know, to our possession with uses to be determined. Do you know what I mean? And would we then run the risk of having to come up with something to present at that meeting that maybe we will have
Oh,
to,
no,
you know what I mean? Like,
I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think there are people out there that have plenty of ideas what they think we should do with the building. But I think we definitely need to have probably a special district meeting to discuss the school once we're in the position of that the town council has approved and authorized the transfer to us. Because
but Fran, is that, I kind of see where Seth is coming from. We're not, wouldn't really be asking for permission to consummate the deal because we feel we already have that permission. And at that point, the deal will have been negotiated. And the last thing we want is for, you know, people
we
to
back
be
out of it even at
seeking
that
different
point. Would that
terms
be,
for the deal. Because it is what it is at this point, I think. But having once the deal has been consummated, having a special meeting to determine now what do we do with it makes sense to me. Is that kind of what you're contemplating, Seth?
yeah, I just don't know how far should we begin a process now. So say, for instance, even, you know, if the town continues to be as it's, you know, obstructionist at best or whatever, they're, you know, they get tangled up and we end up in another process of 6 months, even if that does happen. Or if we end up in 2 months' time with the property in hand, or at least approved by the town council, at which point I don't think we have an option to really back out of it. And having a district meeting after the fact to say, yes, we agree, and we'll take it from the town, you know what I mean, from the town of Barnstable. But should we start now with a meaningful planning process of some variety? And I don't know what form it would take to really, but, you know, then because of the nature of, we had already decided we were going to continue to use whatever the name of that organization is, who did the initial plans for what would have been the High Street building, right?
yeah,
What's the name of that group?
they're
They
They're,
changed the name.
they changed their
Yeah,
name.
they're a new body, right?
They were Brown Linquist, some people, and now it's Outland. or Outlander. What,
So they would be there, they would be who we would have, since we already have monies that we've been granted to begin a process with them, whether it be toward demolition or remodeling or whatever. We're gonna get challenged right at the beginning of that, right before any of that even happens.
yeah,
Seth,
We're gonna be,
Seth, that's only 40,000 of the approximately over 300,000 that we have set aside for.
Right.
So.
so it's
if you're
just on
gonna
that
touch
40,000 that we have the
No,
challenge.
I don't think so. I think, Ray, that there's 40,000 plus the 270,000 that had previously been allocated for some kind of planning purpose.
Right.
Space needs study, and that is there, the objection is to the 270,000.
correct.
What they were essentially saying was that we shouldn't be legally allowed to use them because we haven't done a new RFQ or whatever, or RFP
Yeah,
relative to this project.
And frankly, back when that occurred, events may have kind of overtaken that, in the sense that, are we really interested in a space needs study at this point? That is, what are we going to do with the fire department and the water department? Or is this a whole new?
Right, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I know that an RFP is a long and arduous process, but I don't know that it is. Is it going to be more worthwhile to go through the process of the RFP, or is it going to be more worthwhile to litigate this issue and deal with with whatever comes along with how far they choose to take this particular challenge? So in order to clean the whole thing up.
I'm sorry,
Seth,
I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, not at all. Go on.
Especially because, I don't know, in my mind at least, we're kind of getting crystallized the three possibilities here, which is we acquire the building, it gets knocked down, and kind of reforested, and we ensure the quality of the water. Or B, we can configure it into some kind of, it's not clear what. The proposals we've seen so far are extensive and kind of vague and don't really take into account that we already have Freedom Hall that could be used for some activities that have been suggested. Or C, the fire department seems very interested in a new fire building and a new fire building on that spot. So it seems like it makes sense to me for us to decide which of those three we want to pursue before we start doing a space needs study.
Fire commissioners they're starting a planning process right now, is what Kevin told me about what would essentially be their space needs, forward-looking space needs, or because of the inadequacies of their station as it is.
Right.
That they're going to get into a much more, firm footing to what it is that they want, and looking at different district properties. So, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think. I don't know if we should do a new RFP that more accurately represents what it is we're trying to do. I know that may be really cumbersome, but it also may be really cumbersome to have to go back and forth with the Attorney General and then possibly go to court and whatever about whether or not we can spend these funds with this particular organization based on what it initially was, as opposed to what it is going to be now. I just don't know. You know what I mean? Another stumbling block
I know
we can
you
possibly avoid.
I think.
Especially
Go ahead, Mark.
Brian.
No, go ahead, Mark.
Especially if, we have a special meeting and the consensus is we should knock this building down and make it a forest. In which case.
Right. No space needs study necessary for that. I mean,
Right.
you need an engineer to.
Yeah, so that's why I think we need to have a meeting. We need to have a firm decision from the people of the village what we're going to do with that property before we go doing RFPs or doing anything else. That's, that's just spinning people's wheels and wasting people's time if we don't know exactly what we're planning on doing. And then we'd have to look at the financing and, I think, if we have a meeting, we should be able to present the anticipated costs of those 3 possible options.
Jim has a question.
Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I just 2 things. One is, I think that last part you said, Fran, is exactly right. We need to have some indication to people, not just of the possible uses, but some kind of view of what the relative uses would cost.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we'll have a wish list that the district will then not want to undertake the cost of. The second thing I'd say is that if we get to the stage of having a meeting at which suddenly the people want to change the deal that got cut with the town, I think once the town council approves the transfer on the terms that we've discussed with them, it will be very difficult, if not impossible, to make any changes. Okay. And so, when you're thinking about what meeting you want to have with respect to the property, I do think that that's a factor also that should be borne in mind.
Well, I think with that, if Mark Boudreau feels that we were, given the authority to accept the land at the, and the building at that meeting that we had, then I have no problem, signing whatever the town would like me to sign without a meeting to discuss it.
Yeah, and then the next meeting would be, the one you described aptly, which is, this is great. Now what do we do?
Right.
That seems reasonable to me. I mean, I think that just so that we don't muddy it any further and just get the transfer, because we've already set it in motion and that's that.
Yeah.
But and then in terms of fund, so say the town council approves it, we have our annual district meeting, we call a special district meeting. In between those times, what money and what would we be able to do in terms of planning in order to get any kind of meaningful information regarding demolition, regarding remodeling, or any of that, like based on the money that we have and the company that we have that's in place that was from the original RFQ, are we going to be challenged there, or are we going to have that original $40,000 to spend, but not the $270,000 that we put aside originally? So can we come to that meeting, or we could have time? I mean, there could be a lag time, but do you see what I'm saying? How?
Yeah, I think,
what's our avenue for providing that information in a time? You know what I mean?
It's the same for doing a demolition. We'd have to do an RFP. I've been sort of silently, constantly praying that the town would go out and do an RFP for Marston's Mills, and that would give us a ballpark figure for what it would be for Cotuit.
I think it's listed now. I think that it just went out.
It is.
Well, they just have.
It is.
It is.
Oh, it did for Marston's Mills demolition?
Yeah, I didn't read it, but I heard that it was coming.
Yeah, they told us at our meeting last week that that's been now put out to bid.
Oh, great. So, that'll give us a ballpark figure for Cotuit.
Yeah, Fran, what I was, and Seth, I'm not sure that we need, for the meeting Fran is contemplating, like really specific numbers.
I don't think we do either, but
Ballparks based on.
Marston Mills is estimated to be X, and the fire department can say a similar fire building was built in 2018 and cost Y, and like orders of magnitude, kind of,
right,
with all kinds of caveats, but this generally is the range we're talking about.
yeah, and then
right,
operating the building as a community center, putting in a new heating system is approximately going to cost Z.
right. That sounds fine. I want to get, I mean, I would like to get, again, optimistically assuming that the town will follow through on a timeline that's even roughly, even within the same ballpark that
Right.
they've suggested now,
Yeah.
that we get ahead of it so that we have, you know, as much information as we can and get it done as quickly as we can. You know, it doesn't seem like in this time frame, in the 2 years that we've spent doing this, you know, we've seen whatever 11%, you know, real inflation and increase in every little thing that's going on. I don't think it's going to get a whole lot better. Well, we could have a recession coming up, but just so that we, you know what I mean? I just keep the ball
Crazy
rolling and
optimist,
be
yeah.
ready.
Oh, good.
So I have one question and one comment. The comment is just, I think I've mentioned this before, but so everyone is aware again, the conservation restriction will eventually have to be approved by the state,
Right.
which is a process that has lately been taking over a year. And the parties have agreed that we will go through to consummate the deal while that review is pending, with the thought that we both parties have a high degree of confidence that it will be approved, if not exactly in form, then substantially as written, because of the history of similar CRs.
Yeah.
And then the question is, when we acquire this property, will we be paying taxes on it to the
No.
town?
No. We don't pay any taxes.
Okay. So I thought we paid taxes to the town for Freedom Hall, and is that, no?
We just have to pay them $150 a year now for our annual inspection.
Okay.
But yeah, we don't pay property taxes. They pay us property taxes. So I know that there's a bylaw committee scheduled for next week.
This week, actually,
This week,
tomorrow night.
tomorrow night. And
Ray, you had
I'm-
proposed a gift policy.
Yes.
If you could forward me just a paragraph of proposed language so I fully understand what you're contemplating.
Yeah, I had some proposed wording that I was going to send you. I meant to do it before the meeting. I'll do it right after. And it's basically to protect the district from someone giving the district something that the district does not want. Piece
Okay.
of property, an asset that has costs. It was recommended by the previous auditors in both my districts. We've enacted one in West Barnstable, and I'm recommending we do the same here.
Okay, we will take a look at that. As I've mentioned previously, the bylaws committee will not be looking at the proposed water department stabilization fund, as that has been tabled for the time being, at least.
I'm going to schedule a policy advisory committee this week. I realized I said that last month, but I'm going to do it tomorrow. It's
okay.
on my list.
Okay. So is there any public comment?
I don't see any public comment, but you were going to possibly let people know that it may be possible that we can extend our Zoom
Oh,
meetings.
yeah. So,
I think Phil Odens has his hand raised.
oh,
Sorry for public comment.
I don't,
hi, Phil.
Hi, yeah, a pretty minor one. Carol's ace was on at the beginning and we were texting back and forth on some stuff. She was under the impression that the standing agenda is supposed to have a public comment section at the beginning as well as at the end. And I don't know that to be the case other than she mentioned it. So if that's the case, you might want to change the standing agenda.
Yep, okay, well, I'll put it back to the beginning as opposed to having two of them.
Again, I don't know. She had mentioned that she thought.
I think we
was-
did
Oh,
have that. I think that was a policy advisory thing that we did do. Didn't we have at the beginning and at the end of the meeting?
Yeah,
Was that
right.
last year?
Yep, we were doing that.
So back to Zoom, the legislation that Baker signed that extended Zoom the last time expires March 30th. The House of Representatives and the Senate up on Beacon Hill have both endorsed extending the Zoom legislation because they haven't figured out a way to write legislation for hybrid meetings, which means some people could be in person and some people could be on Zoom for the meeting. You know, so that's on the way to the governor's desk. So that may be signed. It has to be signed by March 30th. Now, last time when Baker signed the extension, he signed it on the last day. So I don't know what Healy's going to do, but you know, hopefully they're going to extend it. But if not, we'll be back to in-person meetings. And I was talking to Lisa, and I was suggesting that if we could bring our laptops to Freedom Hall, and I actually have a couple of spare laptops, and use laptops in Freedom Hall to do a Zoom meeting. That way it can be, you know, people can watch it, and it'll be much easier to put up on the website. The just the last meeting that I'm aware of that was held at Freedom Hall by the water department a couple of months ago was they used the sound system at the hall and it was unintelligible actually. So that's
Now, well, I just have one comment on that. So if we do have to go back to meeting in person, we'll, and we don't have an adequate system. I realize we passed was it a policy or a, whatever you want to call it, saying that we avowed to do both hybrid and to have a recording in Zoom. You know, if we do have to go back and we can't find an adequate solution for the sound system, I would like to repeal that so that we can just meet in person and not, because it's really like a pantomime, a charade, if we're going to go down there and make a recording that nobody can possibly decipher. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know I've got a problem with doing that, but I you know, seriously want to continue doing the Zoom because I think that gives many more people access to the committee meetings. And you know, it was nice when we were doing the recordings, but they were always very difficult to hear, particularly the water department, because they mumble. Yeah, you guys mumble. Where you sit 5 feet away from the microphone. So I just think, you know, it'd be nice if we could put a TV camera in Freedom Hall and do it that way, but we don't have the money to do it. So right now, I think if we could do it, you know, with better laptops than what we were using from the fire department, the iPads, I'd like to think that maybe that would work well. And maybe the finance could, if that works, then maybe the finance department can find some money for laptops for Freedom Hall as a gift from someone. So our next meeting will be,
Fran,
yeah,
before you close, could I get the committee's approval to accept the 3-year audit extension or audit fee at $17,500 for the next 3 years?
So moved.
okay. Is there a second?
second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Thank you. Aye, in favor.
Thank you.
Okay,
Ray,
thanks.
when do we expect this year's auditor's letter?
We have it already. It was,
Kevin,
I thought I distributed it to all of you. And then it was going to be, I'll send it again, Mark. Not a
Thanks,
problem.
Ray. I may have missed it.
I think you might have been on vacation.
And you asked me to wait to post it online until everyone had this meeting and approved that it could be posted on the website.
Yeah, that's the auditor's report, not the letter.
The auditors,
Yeah, just the auditor's report.
the auditors report. Okay, I will do that.
So, our next meeting will be April 24th. And, keep you abreast of whether it'll be at Freedom Hall or in the comfort of your home.
Is that it? I move to adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor, aye. Seth, you have plenty of chance to talk to people all day long.
I guess. Well, I guess so. It'll be fine. Well, I'll see you all soon.